Long-term care facilities such as nursing homes and rehab centers are notorious for being unsafe places to both work and receive care. This is due to the high patient-to-nurse ratios. It's quite common for there to be one nurse in charge of 30 to 50, sometimes 60 and up from that, patients. Given the impossible demands on the nursing staff, patients suffer and are often neglected while in these care facilities. Not because nurses don't care about the patients, but because there are not enough resources to provide the care the patients desperately need. It's quite obvious why patients require care in these facilities, but why do individuals voluntarily work in these institutions? A recent video I made on criminal charges against licensed practical nurse Christann Gainey sparked some conversation in my comments about this very question, bringing to light the risk such employment puts on their license, their freedom, their livelihood. So today, we'll look at why nurses may feel they need to work in dangerous environments like this, and what changes we can make going forward to protect our patients and healthcare workers who both deserve so much better. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our live today. Thank you for being here. Today, like the intro said, we're going to be talking about long-term care and why people tend to work in it. I got a lot of comments on that last video that made me be like, oh, like we really need to address this because it is not the fact that most people are like, I mean, some people work in long-term care because they absolutely love it. But for a lot of people, it is the only place that they can actually become employed, or it is going to, that they've worked there forever and that's what they think. So let us dive right in. I made an intro, so I'm going to make you watch it, and then we will get reading some comments. The intro is just to introduce me to people who haven't been on the channel before, and it makes me feel very fancy. Okay, ready, set, go. Why, hello there, friend. I'm Liz, a family nurse practitioner on a mission to make healthcare, education, and information more accessible through the power of YouTube and sarcasm. Why? Because our healthcare system is broken, and we all deserve better. But to fix this problem, we must first understand it. So go grab your sassy feelings. I certainly will bring mine, and let's learn together. All right, now we can actually start the show. I just really needed to force you all to watch that with me. Hello, everyone who is here. Mama Nurse. Yes, Mama Nurse is here. Everything will be fine. They get comfortable or feel like that's the only place they can work. Yep, that is essentially the point we're going to be making today. The thing that really ticked me off, that actually got me to want to start talking about this on here, was as I was going through and looking at the comments on this video. If you haven't watched it, I will leave it linked down below. The Christann Gainey case, she was a nurse that works in a long-term care facility. She had 39 patients. She falsified documentation, but the point I was trying to make on the video was she was set up for failure because there was no way on earth she would be able to actually do the things she was required to do by the facility. A tragic outcome happened for the patient, but I think, as with all of these, focusing on how can we change long-term care rather than how can we blame her for trying to operate in a system that is setting you up to not succeed, is where we should be paying attention. Okay, so let's look. These comments, they were starting to get to me, and I was like, you know what? We're going to talk about it because things like this need to have light shed on them. So the first one was, I'll highlighted this part because I thought it was important. Sorry, I've been an RN for decades. Any RN or LPN who allows themselves to be put in dangerous situations have to have their heads examined. If it's that bad, leave. It's unsafe for everyone. A paycheck isn't worth it. And through this whole thing, this won't be a terribly long live. At the end, we'll do a Q&A and then we'll timestamp it along the way. So if you're watching it on the replay, you can catch those little bits. But it just struck me as very elitist and privileged that everyone was like, a lot of people were coming out and saying like, well, then just don't work there, as if that's a solution that every single person has. And I don't think it is. Why on earth would you agree to take responsibility for 38 patients? 38 patients in only one nurse is a disaster waiting to happen. If you lose your license, no one is coming to your defense. I mean, that's very true. If you do lose your license, no one is coming to your defense, but I don't think people are like jumping up and down like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to take this super dangerous job. For goodness sake, that's not what it says, but that's what we'll say to make the YouTube gods happy. Why would anyone take a job with a 37-to-1 ratio? Also, I didn't hear how racism was attributed to the case. I only heard extreme negligence from the hospital and the LPN. This was also something that I had thrown out in that video, was that nursing is inherently racist and that this is kind of like building into that structure. We're going to talk a lot about that today because this has a lot to do with race. I saw a lot of angry white ladies in my comments talking about how they did not like that I was bringing up that this had to do with race, and they were not pleased. So we're going to have a little chat with them today. I don't feel sorry for nurses who put themselves in these positions and then assume facilities will watch their backs. She's willingly walked into that madness as if like this is what she wanted to do. She was like, what am I going to do today? Like go for a walk in the park, hang out with my kid, or go and take care of way too many people and be super overwhelmed. Pretty sure it wasn't she wasn't doing this for fun. No amount of no amount of money would compel me to accept that workload. And it might not compel you, but let's remember, not everyone else is you. Not everyone is in your situation. There's no way on earth anyone can provide barely the minimum care on 37 patients. I totally agree. There is no way on earth that you could provide care to 37 patients. And then this is why I chose travel nursing and my specialty ER. And I don't think everybody who commented here was, out to go and get her. I wanted to raise awareness on the issue. Like I said, that I think this is not a choice that a lot of people made. A lot of people have to work in these environments. Okay. So this person is saying like, oh, well, I wouldn't choose travel nursing. I would just go work in the ER. And so we're going to talk today about how not everyone has the choice to be able to go work in the ER, no matter how much they would love to. Let me see. So Chad says LPNs have two choices, long-term care or home health. And that is absolutely some of the top two. And we'll talk about it later. Some of the top two jobs opportunities for LPNs. I do want to say in that video, the LPNs are getting jobs in a lot more places. However, the data does show that those two are long-term care is the number one places that LPNs tend to work. Interestingly, with COVID, LPNs are having a lot more opportunities in terms of employment. So in my area, long-term care is still by far the number one place listed for jobs for LPNs. However, there are hospitals that are starting to hire nurses that are LPNs again. And I think that's great. The hospital I worked at hired LPNs, and then we switched to Magnet, and then they like threatened them all that they had to quit or they had to get their RN, and not all of them wanted to. And it was a mess because they were the ones that knew the most. But overwhelmingly, while there are other options, long-term care is the place that people get hired the most as LPNs. So let us look for a wee moment at, in case you're totally unfamiliar with how the structure of all of this is, RN, LPN, the whole like nursing rundown. And I do want to say in the last video, I think someone pointed out that I accidentally said like LPNs make less than nurses. And that was absolutely my bad and my fault. LPNs are nurses. I'm a huge advocate for that. I should have said registered nurses because LPNs are nurses. And that's something we all need to get a little bit more comfy saying because LPNs just get really like the raw end of the stick so much of the time because they just get like pooped on. So this is kind of a rundown if you're unfamiliar with how the nursing system works. CNA is like a tech. LPN is usually like a 1-year program to become an LPN. You take an NCLEX. It's called the NCLEX PN. For practical nurse. LPN and LVN are the same. I believe there's 2 states, California and one other one, maybe Texas, who use LVN. But if you hear LPN and LVN, those are interchangeable. And then there's a registered nurse, an RN, that is acquired through either like most commonly a 2-year associate's degree with 2 years of prereqs before, so a total of 4, a bachelor's degree. You can get a master's degree now. If you're interested in the deep weeds of how to become a registered nurse, there's like 50 options. And I have a couple different ways you can become one on my channel. I will leave those linked below. And then you have advanced practice nurses. I'm an advanced practice registered nurse. I have I'm a nurse practitioner. And then there's non-clinical specialties. So this is kind of laying the groundwork where you might say, hey, why would someone pick to be an LPN instead of an RN, right? Because we're talking about why are so many LPNs stuck working in long-term care when the horrific conditions would make you be like, I don't want to work there. Let's look at first to understand that why would someone be inclined to become an LPN instead of any of the other options? Also, something I think we need to completely erase any of the stigma around is people who just want to be LPNs and are like, that's their goal, because a lot of the times people are like, oh, well, when are you going back for your RN? And like being an LPN is a perfectly wonderful, valuable end stage career, right? So we just need to normalize that. Side tangent over. So these are the differences. I live in Pennsylvania, so I just looked up these statistics, why someone might pick an LPN program versus a ADN program. So an LPN program is a lot more accessible. Here you're going to see that a LPN program is usually 12 to 18 months. And then a associate's degree is like 2 years, and then the associate's has a lot of prereqs before it as well. So that even though it says it's 2 years, it's definitely more. And then cost is going to be a big difference too. So an LPN program, most of them are a certificate or a diploma program. And so the cost here is going to be like $2,000. I don't know who's paying $36,000 in their programs, but friends, that's a lot of money for those. Usually you're running in like the 2 to 5,000 from what I've seen from my research. And then I don't think I included the slide, but an associate's degree for a like registered nurse is going to be more like 8 to 30,000. So the price difference is huge, and the accessibility of it, the time is less. So if you are someone who is not like, maybe you are having to completely pay for college or any kind of training like right out of the gate all on your own, you don't have as many family resources, you have kids, and so you need to start making money quickly, any type of thing like that where you need to be transitioning into the role a lot quicker, that is something that is you're going to want to be able to, flip into it quicker. You aren't going to want to go to grad school or go into get your ADN, your registered nurse, anything like that. It's much more accessible to come in at the LPN level. A lot of people too are saying caffeinated RN. I personally did it because I wanted more experience in healthcare prior to my RN. That's another reason a lot of people do it, is to just kind of get started working in healthcare, because you can do that on your way. If you do want to move on and later become an RN or anything, you can then do this first, and then you're already getting experience and you're going to learn a ton. Mama Nurse says that she was a CNA prior to being a nurse and it was the best decision she ever made. Yeah. And that's going even a step beyond that. You're a CNA, and then maybe there's a lot of people that go CNA, LPN, RN, and they like do the thing, or CNA, LPN, or people who stay as CNAs, because we need all of these people in our healthcare system in order for it to function, right? And I have often found that LPNs and CNAs are way harder working than nurses. Actually, if we're being totally honest, I have found that I have my BSN, my bachelor's. I have found that BSN nurses are the laziest of the grouping. I would rather precept any day of the week someone in an ADN or an LPN program or a CNA than a BSN nurse, because usually we're princesses or princes, or so I think everyone gets a bad rap, and slowly here we're going to go over all my different feelings about how nursing is just a disaster of people feeling very elitist and pretty racist. So that's what we're looking with. That's kind of a background on why people would maybe choose LPN instead of going right into becoming a registered nurse. Because I know that's something I got into some heated arguments in the chat with some people who are like, well, they should just become registered nurses. And I was like, that is not necessarily, that's easier said than done, and talks to the fact that you have a lot of access to that type of situation. So let's just lay out, I'll use my case as an example here. I was set up to kind of go to college, right? So my parents helped me get there. They helped me financially support me through that. What if, you aren't in a situation where your parents are necessarily setting you up that way, where that's not the expectation, where you've been, working and helping actually support your family? Like maybe you are in a single parent household and you have younger siblings and you literally have to go to work. Otherwise you're not going to pay rent and your family's depending on you. Those are very different situations than, so everyone's situation is not the same. So let us look. So now that we kind of see the entry point, why people might pick LPN, because it's it has a much shorter time to become one. You actually learn pretty much the same stuff, which then makes you question everything about your um, nursing education. Mama Nurse also says this is a great point. I know a lot of mothers who choose the LPN route because of the flexibility of the program. Yes, the programs are much more flexible. A lot of them are at night, so you can do it around other life things. Again, this is something that like ADN programs, again, much more accessible than BSN programs, which are the, hoity-toity elites that don't want anyone to be them. So licensed practical nurses working in long-term care. So this is, I'll just read it on here because I think it says as well. The licensed practical and vocational nurses are the second largest health care occupation that requires post-secondary education. So this is a large group of people, right? So that makes sense because this is a better way to kind of enter. It gets you in the job quickly. So obviously a lot of people do it. About 600,000 people, a little over that, are employed in the US as LPNs. LPNs play a vital role in the delivery of long-term care services. The largest share of LPNs is employed in nursing homes and long-term care facilities, with more than 1/3 of LPNs working in that setting. So that is the number one place that they tend to work. This is also going to be, that's not included in this, are things like rehab. That's when you get discharged from the hospital, but you're not ready to go home. That's another, sometimes they'll call them like long-term acute care, or they'll be differentiated, but that's another huge area when you're looking at jobs that you'll see that they will hire LPNs. Many LPNs provide long-term care services in home health continuing care, retirement communities, assisted living facilities, etc. So you might be saying, okay, so if LPNs, I'm an LPN, why wouldn't you go take one of those other jobs? Like, yes, the most common job is to work in a nursing home or in long-term care. However, why would you pick if you had all those other options? There's obviously like, 2/3 or 3/4, I forget what the math was already, of all those other jobs. Why wouldn't you go pick one of those jobs, friend? Also, I know this is like doing its thing back here. I don't know. Oh, wait. I fixed it. Magic. Perfect. Okay. That's going to be a lot less annoying. I'm sorry if that bothered you. Why would people go and want to work in long-term care? Money. Different industries offer higher salaries. Government agencies pay for most RNs with median, blah, blah, blah. Nursing care facilities pay LPNs the highest median annual wage of around $48,840. That's going to obviously vary by your state. But if we want to know why would people want to go work in these long-term care facilities if there are other options, this is going to be a big one because who doesn't want to make more money? Like, I literally don't know anyone who wouldn't want to make more money. So you're going to go to the job that is probably going to give you a better income, right? Okay, so this is all making sense so far. Long-term, in general, LPNs do make less money than other nurses, right? So we're kind of already seeing this. We're at like 43-ish thousand when we get our bachelor's. This is talking about the education system within, if you have your LPN, if you're a nurse. If you have a certificate program, you typically get paid less than if you have your associate's degree and you are an LPN, and then less than if you have a bachelor's. So this is just, again, showing for the same job. This is like a minor, not a side tangent, just laying the groundwork more, saying that if your degree wouldn't even necessarily have to be anything having to do with the fact that you're an LPN, but you're going to get paid more. So kind of more of just the background of the structure here really favors, it's kind of elitist in that it's favoring these degrees, even if they really don't have anything to do with what you're doing, right? So kind of like the BSN, right? Because we don't really learn a whole lot in the classes that get us our BSN as a nurse. But the powers that be really like you to have those letters feeding into making things less accessible, and just kind of keeping things status quo, which is how people like it. So you might be wondering why then. So people are taking these jobs because they're going to make more money. But why is it, that still seems unsafe. And so tell me why LPNs are still making overall, what are we, as we dabble in here, like, why can't they go and get other jobs? Because a lot of people, they're going to go and they're going to work in long-term care, and then they're going to be like, oh, wow, this is like really, really dangerous and I don't want to do it anymore. So then we kind of dive into here's the racist part. There's no way to beat around that bush. So this is where we dive into nursing is inherently racist. Are we ready? Great. So a lot of studies have done this one in particular. I'll leave them all linked down below. That they would do these studies and they would compare LPNs and LVNs. And they would do literally like compare absolutely everything. So, same program, you went to the same program, you have the same numbers of years of experience, you have all of the same qualifications, you've both made no errors in your practice, yada 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 yada. Why are you making less money? Right? Why is this not being equated here? Why aren't you getting promoted more? And this fun study found that unexplained variation, which is we don't really know why this is happening, however, negated these gains. And the study provided limited insight as to which attributes were contributing to the unexplained variation. What this was doing, this study was talking about why the whole position of it was nurses it was looking at Hispanic and Black nurses. It was saying why on paper they should be advancing a lot more, right? But they're not. So then it leaves it to unexplained difference. This one also found unexplained difference among LPNs and LVNs. Non-Hispanics made significantly more than Hispanics. So if you're white, you're going to probably make more money than if you are Hispanic. Interesting. Similar to RNs, Black LPNs could have made significantly more than white LPNs, but the difference was negated by unexplained factors. Even when you controlled for everything. Among aides, assistants, non-Hispanics made significantly more than Hispanics. So basically, if you're white, you're probably going to make more money. You're going to have more career advancement. And this whole thing, remember, we're talking about just because everyone was telling me that I was wrong, that nursing isn't racist. So I'm just throwing this in there as a little bit of like little spice to remind us why some people can't work in different situations, which we will get to in one moment. Another study. And this one found that regression, I don't know what all those words really mean, but the conclusion was differences in earning between underrepresented and overrepresented nurses is a suggestion of discrimination. This article also talked about LPNs, but all of this to come back and say, why are people working in these healthcare systems is a lot of the times because they cannot get jobs somewhere else. Okay. So now that we've kind of laid the groundwork for all of that, I have heard of many cases in my own life of people not being able to find jobs in those other settings due to some pretty racist things that came like directly out of people's mouths. So I will give you a personal example. And then if anyone has any, obviously this is like, you don't have to share about this, but if you want to, you are certainly welcome to use this platform to kind of express how you've experienced something horrible in this field related to this. I worked in primary care for a long time, or 3 years as a nurse practitioner. And we had a phenomenal LPN that was training at our practice. She was a student. And she was Hispanic. She was bilingual. She spoke Spanish and English, which was great because a lot of our population spoke Spanish. Spanish was her first language, so you could tell she spoke fluent English. She has lived here, and she did have like the tiniest accent. And I was giving a recommendation for a different provider at a specialty office that I knew needed an LPN at their office. And I was like, oh, this person would literally be perfect. Like she is brilliant, all of these things. And the person, I was like, if we could afford a LPN at this office, like I would be, I would be forcing my boss to hire her. And he literally told me to my face, he was like, I want the patients to have someone who is a little bit more like them sitting at the front desk, if you know what I mean. He goes, she's like, I'm sure she's nice, but the accent, and they're just not going to be able to see themselves in that role since she would be like really patient facing. And I was like, wow, that is very telling. And I'm willing to bet that she is not the only person who has probably experienced that. I have heard of many other people in my DMs recently telling me that they have applied for all the other LPN jobs in the area. I know they want to work in the doctor's offices. They want to work in the hospitals. They want to work in the other jobs, but they don't get them. And this is all coming from people who are not white. And it's kind of horrifying. And it's not, it definitely, I think, plays into this. It also, another thing, huge things that plays into this is just the elitism within nursing, right? So we want everyone to have their BSN, even though really there's not any difference in, how like BSN and ADN nurses are doing versus like, I don't know if there's a bunch of studies of like how LPNs perform in the hospital. I would be willing to bet it would be pretty much the same because our training is eerily similar. And it's just sad. So that's why most LPNs will end up working in long-term care, particularly if you are like any in the BIPOC community, because you might not get other jobs just because people are racist and nursing is right along in that with you. So that's kind of my little tangent on that. That's why people would work in long-term care. They can't get hired into hospitals sometimes just because people are just rude, and that's how the situation operates. Now let's go back and we can kind of like chit chat. If you were only here for that part of the discussion, we're going to read comments now. So thanks for coming to my TED talk. And yeah, I appreciate you all being here. So Sarah said, is there a big difference in scope of practice between an RN and an LPN to warrant the different levels? Not really. So a LPN, at least in the hospital, they could not give blood. And they could do an assessment, but we needed to like lay eyes on the patient and like verify it. No one ever verified it because the LPNs on our unit they trained all of us, even though then they all got let go because not all of them wanted to go back and get their registered nursing license. So there's not the biggest, and in long-term care facilities, LPNs can do even more. Like a lot of people in that video were like, oh, can they do neuro assessments? And yes, in long-term care in a lot of states they can. A nurse usually has to be like, you always have see, I did it again and I need to stop. You need to have a registered nurse in most places for like at least 8 hours. However, when there is no registered nurse on site, an LPN can do the assessments. So in a lot of places, like there are differences in scope of practice, but they're not huge. And then when you see people doing like the exact same job, it kind of just makes you question all of the nursing system and be like, why do we why do we do all of this extra stuff if our outcomes are kind of the same and we're not actually learning anything additionally? Doesn't really make sense. The pay for LPNs, this is from Regina Junzadam. The pay for LPNs in a nursing home is much better in a nursing home compared to any other. The nursing home in my area starts paying LPNs $29, where the hospital is starting paying $16 an hour. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. But yeah, a lot of it, like we talked about, a lot of it is you get paid more to work in long-term care. Alejandro said, in my area, nurses who wish to earn more money as well as benefits will apply to correctional facilities, which is a whole other issue as it depends on who you know and not on your skills. That's very interesting. I just did a video on a correctional facility type of thing, and that was horrifying. I feel like I need to go and look more into like healthcare in correctional facilities. I have friends that work in them. But that was a hot mess. Let me tell you that. And then I thought, like in the comments, a lot of the correctional facility nurses, it was very interesting. They were like, oh yeah, no, like this is very standard. Like this is just how it goes. I was like, well, that's horrifying. We should probably talk about that. Caffeinated PRN said what's happening now is that a lot of LPNs are quitting permanently. Permanent LVN jobs to go work and travel instead. I feel like that's all nurses. Everyone's like, bye. You don't want to replace, you don't want to pay me very well. And I'm going to go. Let me see. Chad said, sexist, I'm a certified nurse midwife trying to find clinical sites at the job. About a full 1/3 response responded with, sorry, we don't work with men. Oh yeah, that's frustrating. Yeah, that would be very frustrating. Good luck. I hope you find preceptors. That journey is exhausting. Doesn't magnet have something to do, Nurse Mo said, doesn't magnet have status have something to do with LPNs having a limited choice in nursing job? Yeah, magnet is just complete BS. It does nothing for the nurses and it just makes the hospital look better, but the responsibility of getting magnet is on the nurses. And in a lot of places, you're doing like all the labor and you're not getting paid for it. So clearly I love Magnet. But yes, Magnet wants a certain percentage. So what Magnet is a designation that the hospital gets for their nursing staff, basically like nursing excellence. And it's very expensive. So only the rich hospitals can pay to be certified by Magnet. And then it just like looks nice. Hospitals can put it on their website. They can tout like, oh, we're a Magnet hospital. You have to have your nurses meeting certain requirements. You have to be like have unit-based committees. You have to have a certain percentage of your nurses having their bachelor's degree. And I think it limits the number of LPNs that they can have. Like if LPNs, when we switched to Magnet, LPNs, like they told them you have to get your RN or you can't work here anymore on the floor. So it might have it in the stipulation of, hey, you have to do this or you're done. But yeah, so Magnet has to do with a lot of the things that are just messed up in the field of nursing, in my opinion. Oh, it's a whole, it's a whole thing. Back when Miss Minsa said back when LPNs were phased out, patients were vocal, but it didn't matter. Well, that's depressing. Yeah. That's a whole mess. Oh, that's a whole mess. Let me see. I'm going to go back and scroll up to the top, but that's basically my mini tangent on this that I felt the need to share with the internet. Let me see. Is an LPN, Alexa said, is an LPN the same as a CNA? No. So an LPN can pass meds, they can do assessments, they can do little like procedures. Is going to depend on your state. An LPN is much more like an RN versus a CNA who is doing more like patient care tasks, typically changing patients, they can't get meds. You are assisting with like ambulation, like all very important things. But no, an LPN is closer to a registered nurse than a CNA. All very, very important. And yep, caffeinated PRN said we still have to take the NCLEX. Yep, a different, it's like the NCLEX PN, like we talked about. I'm currently finishing up my RN program. Congratulations. That's very exciting. Let me see. Blue Ridge Nurses said, I work as an LPN inpatient and we're called licensed inpatient techs. At the hospital I work for, you must be enrolled in an RN program within 15 months of hire. I don't like that. Licensed inpatient techs? What the heck? Like, why? Electric Wonton said, I feel lucky and blessed to have my LPN job. I'm not scared to work some days, but damn, I want to know what setting you work in. Kathy said, if no one works in long-term care, who will care for the elderly? That's why we got to vote, friends. We got to vote for safe mandated ratios in long-term care. There's legislation out right now. I know the White House just came out with something like a month ago, and it said they were going to look into like crack down harder on like Medicare and Medicaid, how they investigate their long-term care facilities. And they said they wanted better staffing ratios, but they didn't specify the staffing ratios. They just said they wanted it better and safer. So that's not really helpful because how do you qualify better and safer? But voting for like mandated staffing ratios, when those things come up on your ballots, you want to be like, yes, I would like that. And yeah, electing people who support that, always wonderful. And who will care for the elderly? I don't want to say that it's not the people who work in it's not people's. That's a great question. I'm not saying I don't want people to care for our elderly. Obviously I do. And there's a lot more people than just elderly people who require care in like long-term care. But it's not, nurses shouldn't have to like lay down, you know what I mean? And be like, yeah, I'm going to accept this crazy dangerous assignment so that these people can get care. Like I'm going to put my own physical and mental well-being on the line. No, that's the long-term care facility's job, is to make sure that you are safe and you're providing an environment where your employees can come to work and not feel like they are just totally on their own. Some people, I graduated in 2021. I did COVID testing as a clerical work. I refuse to do skilled nursing facility or long-term care. I don't blame you. I have often said that I could never work in long-term care. I also have the privilege of not being in a position where I can't get a different job other than long-term care. You know what I mean? So I have that option. And I think that's something that's overlooked a lot in these conversations is everyone who just says, well, just go get a different job. But you can't just go get a different job if like you have to pay your bills and this is your option. Like you've tried the other options and it's just not working, or this is the highest paying job and you need a higher income in order to survive. Like it's not as easy as just saying like I'm going to quit and see what happens, which is I think a position that a lot of nurses are fortunate to usually be in. Is just being able to be like, I'm going to quit and find something safer. That's a huge tone of like the fact that you have the ability to do that is that's some privilege that you've got right there, which isn't your fault. I mean, but it's just good to acknowledge that so that we can feel like the blame a lot of the time then goes on people like LPNs who then don't leave those situations. They're like, well, you should have just left. And it's like, that's not realistic. Melba said, can we talk about bullying in long-term care on top of staffing? It makes it absolutely miserable. So I've never worked in long-term care, so I can't add to that. Bullying is rampant in nursing. But I can imagine in long-term care, it could get pretty vicious as well, especially with just your patients are there for a long time. You work with like a limited amount of the same people. There's probably a lot of frustration, a lot of stress, a lot of overwhelm. So I can imagine that the bullying could get pretty intense. Joshua said, I worked in the ER as a tech, similar to paramedics, and they say they will expand to fill my full scope. Also just got my acceptance to an LVN to RN transition program. That's very exciting. If you do the stuff paramedics do, that's hardcore. That's just like, that's a lot. Paramedics can do anything. I'm convinced of it. Melba said I was bullied by the next shift for not finishing on time when I was the only nurse on a unit, usually staffed by 2 LPNs and 1 RN. Yeah, that's miserable. Just kind of let them be angry and like, let that go. Hi, Sophia. Thanks for joining our chit chat. I think we're pretty much, I don't know if I have anything else to say on the topic. I really just needed to come and vent to you. And I appreciate you listening to me about it. Is there anything else that I didn't cover that I should have covered on the topic? If you have any feelings that you're like, I just need to get these out on here, by all means, let's do it. But oh man, this just ruffled my feathers the wrong way. That was like the amount of privilege that people are just like, well, just like leave and quit your job. I was like, no, no, you don't. No, that really makes me annoyed. And we aren't going to keep blaming the people at the bottom. It's an up top issue. Alejandro, oh, he agrees with me. It's an trickle down issue. Upper admin and doctors prioritize more patients to bill Medicare, which creates a heavier workload for nurses and below. Yeah. And I would say it's more admin, having been on the side of it in an office where they're telling you, hey, you need to see this many patients. Or you're not going to get your salary. That hasn't happened to me, but a lot of people, if you work on like RVUs, that means like how much productivity do you have? And so if you don't hit it, then you don't get paid. I would say it's, if people own their own practice, obviously that's different, but in most places, it is not the doctors, the nurse practitioners, or the PAs that are prioritizing seeing more patients. It is the administrators who are telling them, hey, now you need to work and do all of the, you need to see this many more patients, because most of us don't actually want to see more. Most of us actually want to like get to know people and be, provide good like care. Tara says it's not pay isn't enough for the stress. Very true. But the point I was trying to make here was not everyone has the option to just say like, oh, the pay isn't worth the stress, I just won't take the job, because sometimes they cannot get jobs in other facilities or other situations. And so that's kind of what we were highlighting here, is that it's not always the case that you can take a different job. Long-term care is stressful. Yes, it is. Let me see. I've heard that hospitals were so desperate they'd contracted travel LPNs in the ER doing everything in RN beyond their scope. Wink, wink. So like a lot of nurses though who are LPNs can do a lot of the stuff. You know what I mean? Especially if you've worked in a more rural area. So I would almost push back on that and say that like LPNs are very well trained. Like looking at the curriculum, I was like, oh yeah, you learn a lot of stuff I do. And they really shove it down your throat in nursing school that like I went to a BSN program. So they're like, you are so much better than ADN nurses. And I think it just goes like all the way down. You know what I mean? That everyone's like, oh, well, you're obviously better than this person. But then when you stop to look at what everyone can actually do, you're like, oh, we all kind of do the same thing. Like, why are we fighting amongst ourselves rather than fighting like the outward thing? So I certainly think that if, you know, if they're filling it with LPNs, then I think we're going to see a lot more LPNs hired, because that is the trend in my area, is more LPNs are being hired back into the hospital, because now all the hospitals are like, oh, all of the registered nurses are leaving. So let's do this. And it's working out quite well from what I have heard. And so I think they're starting to move back into that, which I think would be good, because like I said, every LPN I worked with, I learned, like, they literally taught me how to do my job. Do you like how I'm just like waving like tweezers around? Just like I had to trim my beard before I came on here. I was like, oh, this is not, so I was a minute late. Can't have my mustache hanging out here. Mominer says agreed. And let's be real, it takes at least 4 weeks for the whole hiring process from when you submit your application to you actually are on the floor. That could be devastating for some people. Yeah. To just be able to quit and be like, oh, I'm just done. Like, not having pay for 4 weeks is not something that all people can just weather. I would say most people probably cannot weather that. And I think that just goes into my like rant about a lot of people on social media are like, well, just quit, like just quit. And a lot of them, I want to be like, how many of you have situations where either like you have family that would always like meet your, they would not let you lose your house. They would be able to financially support you. Are you the primary breadwinner for your family? And is there no one else you can rely on? Because if that is not your situation, then don't just go out and say, hey, just quit. Tara said, I've noticed LVN openings in places that used to only accept RNs. I'm assuming from COVID. Yeah, I think there's a ton of, I saw in like pediatric hospitals, all sorts of, like, you could get hired into like the burn ICU at the hospital by me. Like, there were a ton more options, which I was pleasantly surprised about, actually. Carly said, I worked in long-term care. I was sad and depressed working with 30 patients, including 2 trachs. Never again. Yeah, it would be absolutely brutal, friends. I do not know, like, all of you who work in long-term care, massive kudos to you, because that is, whew. LVNs, this is from Fred, in California, can do everything except initial assessments and IV antibiotics. See, so there's not a huge difference here. And the initial assessments, I almost wonder if how often do the LPNs and LVNs, do they do them? And then the nurse like signs off on them, because that's what happened at my hospital. The charge nurse, as the charge nurse, you would sign off on it. And you definitely were not going in and like redoing that assessment almost every time. Let me see. Olivia, you said some people are trained and hired to come to the US from other countries. They don't have a choice. They were sponsored. I've seen stuff about this where like, and then they're like contracted in or something. I do not know a lot about that, but that sounds horrifying, like absolutely horrifying, where then like your visa is like in the midst of it because they're your employer. So then they could like kick you out of the country. Like, that is some, and you don't know where, like, you're in a new country. So it's not like you're going to know the legal system very well. It's a hot mess. Long-term care needs to be properly staffed. Yeah, it's not fair to anyone. It's not fair to the nurses who have all this extra liability. It's not fair to the patients. I think the biggest thing is it's not fair to the patients. Like, I would be incredibly hesitant to let anyone I love go into a long-term care facility, just because I know how understaffed they are. I don't think it's that people are, trying to be neglectful in any way, but like, I would bend over backwards to try to keep my family out of it, which is again, a place of immense privilege that I would be able to do that. You know what I mean? So then it just kind of like progresses and keeps going into like who, people, it's just such a mess. Like, who is not going to be able to, it's a huge like social issue, because the people who have more financial means will then, and are more financially like guiding how all of this happens, like within the legal and like voting structure. They're the ones who are going to make these massive donations, right? Their family members might not be the ones that are stuck in these long-term care facilities receiving this care. And so they're going to be able to find workarounds. And it's the people who can't afford to just quit their job to take care of their mom, who are going to be feeling the repercussions of having their parents in these like facilities. And it's sad. So we're all going to vote, right? We're all going to vote, and we're all going to change things, and we're going to vote for mandated staffing ratios. I'll let you know when I see bills or whatever that come up for that. This is such a long-term problem. I worked in leaving it, English. I worked in it, leaving RN classes in 1995. Is there anything we could do to initiate change now, meaning nurse to patient ratio? Supporting legislature and political candidates who are like supportive of mandating ratios. So like California has like mandated ratios for their inpatient floors. I don't think they have it for long-term care. I could be wrong. But supporting legislation that mandates how many patients people have is going to be huge. Supporting candidates who don't go after the nurses, but who go after more of like the actual facilities and holding them accountable, and just like talking about it, right? And fighting with the system and not fighting with nurses. I think we need to, like, one huge thing we need to do is separate within nursing. There's a lot of like squabbles between LPN and RN and ADN and BSN. And we just need to like cut that crap real quick, because we can't even stop fighting within ourselves and saying like, well, you're not a real nurse and you're not a real this, enough to like fight the system. So that would be an actionable thing to do, is just when you hear people, nitpicking amongst nurses, amongst ourselves, is just cutting that crap and being like, hey, we're all nurses. This is all great. Let's just fight the system and vote and have a unified voice there. Everyone knows we fight. Nurses are known to be very catty, right? We're known to be very like bullying, and anyone who ever has worked in nursing, I'm sure you can experience, like if you've worked here at all, you'll experience this, where we'll fight amongst ourselves until we're blue in the face, which doesn't leave a whole lot of room for doing other things. Olivia says we also need to solve if people call out. There might not be anyone who can just come into work. I worked acute rehab. We are our own entity, and you can call every PRN and agency. So basically saying there's going to be holes. Like, what are we going to do when people don't show up? And that's the agency's problem. So I think we need to get out of the mentality too of like, oh, if I stand up for myself and I don't put myself in these working conditions, like, while like this is like the hard thing to balance, right? Because you're saying, oh, I'm going to work here, but I'm not going to work extra. But then what repercussions can the agency and the the long-term care facilities push on me? And not everyone can quit their job, like we were talking about. But in that way, like as much as you can, I would probably push back and like not fill the holes when they pop up. Anthony Corrigan said this is an issue in other countries too. I'm a nurse in Australia, and there was a royal commission into aged care, and there's a huge push for ratio of RNs, ENs, and carers there. That's very interesting. So this is not just an us problem. But Australia has their stuff way more together. I bet they'll do something about it way before we'll be able to. Because somehow someone's going to spin it that mandated nursing ratios are the devil. Then we'll be like, why? Do you hate your grandmother? Like, why? Please come help me understand. Let me see. Virtuous woman said nursing homes are like prisons. I mean, some of them absolutely are. Like I said, I would not let my family, if I had anything I could possibly do, into those places, because they are yikes. Why One Bonanza, why is such a large body of licensed professional nurses so much getting the short end of the stick? What's the root cause? Elitism and racism within the whole healthcare system, essentially, is people don't want to make it it's not easy to climb the ladder. It costs a lot of money. It takes a long time. It is, if it's not something that you can immediately buy into, by being able to go to a BSN program, by doing something else, yeah, it is, there's a lot of barriers there. A lot of BSN programs are like, it's a hard system to break into. And nurses love letters. They love their accolades. They want to, list every single credential under the sun. And have, it's just a very catty world. So, they'll be like, oh, well, LPNs can work here and that's not my problem. Like, you should become a different type of nurse. And it's just, that's my take. Someone else might have a more mature opinion on it, but that's my opinion on how they're getting like the short end of the stick. Is all these other places like Magnet and everybody else who are all funded by hospitals who can pay them a lot of money. It all has to do with like money and power. How shocking. Can then say, hey, we don't want LPNs. And they're like, oh, okay, well, they can go work in the nursing homes. And then some people can't get a job anywhere else, and it's a mess. A vote on mandated ratios failed miserably in Massachusetts a few years ago because it was spun as it would cause ERs to turn patients away because all RNs would be capped at their ratio. How fun. How delightful. That's interesting to know how they actually spin that. But maybe we wouldn't need to use our ERs so much as primary care if healthcare was accessible. But what do I know? What do I know? Do I do call-ins? I could write a book. I'm planning on having like I'm planning on basically starting a anonymous story time type of thing so that no one would be, people can share stories with me and then I will read them as long as they are HIPAA compliant and they are not derogatory to patients. I never want to like poke fun or do anything like that at patients. My aim at talking about this is like attacking the system, not the humans, the patients in it. But I am planning on I'm starting a series. I have one going up, I think this week, of sharing your stories anonymously so that you don't get in trouble, because I don't work for a healthcare system right now. So I can kind of say, I can talk about this stuff without fear of getting fired. And I know that's not the case for everyone. So I don't want anyone to come onto the channel and share stories because I never want it to come back to you, to an employer. But if you have stories, I'm going to start doing story times where we just shared stories on different topics. So, yes, in short. So if you want to hit me up on that, I have my email list down below that you can, I'll always put out like calls, or announcements when I'm going to be doing these. You can follow me on Instagram because I'll always ask over there too. And that's pretty much the big two ways where you can kind of find me, where I'll be doing those questions. We have one coming up on your patient's greatest escapes. And then the one after that is going to be ghost stories. So we're going to do some that are funny, some that are serious. A lot, like I'm planning on hopefully doing the next one after that on like long-term care stories to kind of raise awareness surrounding those, but also hopefully some of them will be less serious so we can have some giggles, because I'm really liking taking a turn into more like commentary, raising awareness on different healthcare issues, but I know it can be really depressing and some people absolutely hate it. They're like, this is not fun. I was like, I know, I'm sorry, but I want to talk about it. Love Tutu Princess says, what's your take on assisted living dementia units? I feel that the ratio is bigger than the norm, 1-40. If LPNs are good enough to handle 1-40 ratio and greater, then why not pay better? I think they should absolutely get paid better. I don't know a lot about assisted living and dementia units, to be honest. Like, from a nursing perspective, 1-40 on a dementia unit does not seem doable. Like you're probably in a place like that because situations are not great, right? You need like monitoring all the time. And like assisted living, you need assistance. So 1-40 seems unmanageable. This is going to sound bad, but like I have found so I've worked at med surg as a nurse and then peds. My patients with like dementia or a lot of care needs, it was a lot like taking care of a toddler, right? They need help eating, feeding, those are the same. Feeding, toileting, they're unsteady on their feet. You kind of have to walk with them. And I couldn't imagine taking care of more than like 4 toddlers at a time, right? So like how could you do 40? It just doesn't make sense. And I find that when I've talked to people about this, I've been able to, if you explain it in terms of toddlers, people sometimes can get it more because they're like, oh, yeah, like that would be completely unreasonable to just like unleash. You need to keep 40 toddlers up and going. And then they'd be like, oh my gosh, no, there's no way. And you're like, yeah, oh my gosh, there's no way. What are we looking at for like daycares? It's usually like 1 to 14 at a tops, or like in preschool. I'm trying to think. I think it's even less. I don't even know, but we need a lot more intervention. Let me see what is. I'm going backwards. Sophia, excited about story times. Yes, me too. If you want to be like Sophia and be an awesome human and get this fun badge, you can support my channel via membership. Here's my shameless plug. And that just helps me make more content like this and be able to do more story time. So thank you for Sophia for being a super best friend of the channel. All of that is linked down below. We have different, just like little tiny different live streams, extra ranting videos, all of that good stuff over if you become a channel member. Following up on the Massachusetts vote, there was virtually no support from doctors for mandated ratios. How shocking. Even though this directly affected RNs, the general public followed the MD opinion. Yes, everyone, and also doctors have a much more cohesive presentation to the public, right? So physicians are much better about squabbling amongst themselves, a lot less. They all kind of toe the party line. They decide on what it is, and they present a united front, which then allows the American Medical Association, which is like their lobbying force, to go forth with one message. Versus in nursing, we are too busy fighting about how you're not a good enough nurse. Like you're a lesser nurse than me over here. And how dare you not have a bajillion letters behind your name and like you shouldn't be able to do this. I'm better than you. We're too busy doing that to even like get a united front out there. The ANA actually also hates nurses. They don't do a lot to actually help us. So that's also not helpful. Maybe if we just stopped fighting with ourselves, we could actually get a nursing union or a nursing lobby group that actually supported nurses who are like actually practicing. That, yeah, it's just a mess. Also, every time a new president comes and they claim they're going to do something and nothing ever happens. I have a whole other thoughts on this. Why don't we? I think it's because they're tired. Because why do we keep electing people that why are we electing people that should be retired? Okay, I understand that like older people, yes, you have a lot of wisdom, but why do we historically why do we historically hire people who are more likely to be very tired and more likely to, I don't understand why we can't be like countries who elect people who are, maybe in a little bit more touch of what is going on right now. Very side tangent. Marlene says I was an RN, so I see it the way you do, Liz. Other nurses were kind of racist and sexist towards me. I am so sorry. And also, yes, it is a hot mess within nursing. And I don't love it. Love Tutu Princess says that's exactly my description of Dementa. I say try keeping toddlers from sticking their fingers in the socket out of a pool or a lake or fighting. Only these toddlers are bigger. Yes, they're bigger and they are like more capable than toddlers in a terrifying way. It's kind of like when your sweet baby goes from being like they're 1 and they can't really get themselves into like too much trouble. And then as they're like encroaching on 2, all of a sudden they can like actually like really get themselves into trouble. They can like open drawers and lock doors and find scissors and like cut things. It's a hot mess. Just a hot mess. You need a good union. ANMF is one of the strongest unions here. And so I believe, Anthony, if I'm correct, you're from Australia, right? I think that's what you said before. We do need a nursing union. If you want me to make a video on all the nursing union stuff that's going on right now or any questions that you have about it, do let me know. I was kind of like dabbling into looking at all of that. I know it's like strike season. So a lot of nurses are striking. There's that whole thing with Stanford where they were like, oh, if you go on strike, we're taking your healthcare away. And I was like, but at the same time, wouldn't it be cool if healthcare wasn't something that you could bargain with as an employer? We just got it because we're humans. That would be nice. But also, that's like truly crappy to be like, hey, if you don't come to work, I am taking away all your health insurance, which is really rude. All right, friends, thank you for coming and hanging out today. I know this was kind of like jumbled and random, but it really struck a chord when everyone was like, just quit. I'm like, that's not everyone's option. Okay. And then we're in this situation because we just keep fighting, and we need to respect our LPNs more and respect the fact that not everyone can just drop their job and leave it. So we need to stop yelling at them to do that and all the things. That's where we are. I appreciate you being here. I think I have an outro video. It's going to be very fun. We're going to try it. I don't think it has sound, but hit the little bell thingy if you want to know when I do these random lives. I appreciate you. Have a lovely day. You are brilliant. You are so much smarter and better, brilliant humans. This is not going well. I need to practice my mantras before then. You're great. You can do hard things. You got this. Bye.